Hey everyone, welcome back to Blue Aquatics, your go-to channel for all things aquarium. I am your host Himanshu Suri, and today we are diving into a question that I get asked a lot. Does a sponge filter reduce ammonia? If you are new to the aquarium hobby or even a seasoned fish keeper, you have probably wondered about ammonia and how to keep it under control. Ammonia is one of the biggest concerns in any aquarium because it's toxic to fish and can wreak havoc on your tank's ecosystem. Sponge filters are a popular choice for many aquarists, especially for small tanks, shrimp tanks, or breeding setups. But can they really tackle ammonia? In this video, we are going to explore every angle of this topic: how sponge filters work, their role in the nitrogen cycle, the science behind ammonia reduction, and practical tips to make sure your tank stays healthy. So grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive into the world of sponge filters and ammonia management. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a video from Blue Aquatics. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a sponge filter? For those of you who are new to the hobby, a sponge filter is a simple, affordable, and highly effective filtration system commonly used in aquariums. It consists of a sponge, usually made of porous foam, connected to an air pump via air-line tubing. The air pump pushes air through the tube, creating bubbles that draw water through the sponge. As water passes through the sponge, debris, waste, and particles get trapped in the porous material, and beneficial bacteria grow on the sponge surface. These bacteria are the key to why sponge filters are so popular, and they play a big role in whether or not a sponge filter can reduce ammonia. Sponge filters are loved for their simplicity, low cost, and gentle water flow, which make them ideal for delicate fish like betas, shrimp, or fry. But to understand how they handle ammonia, we first need to talk about what ammonia is and why it's such a big deal in aquariums. Ammonia is a nitrogen based compound that forms in an aquarium when organic matter like fish waste, uneaten food, or decaying plants breaks down. It's the first stage of the nitrogen cycle, which is the natural process that keeps your aquarium's water chemistry balanced. Ammonia is highly toxic to fish even in small amounts. It can burn their gills, stress them out, and in high concentrations lead to illness or even death. In a healthy aquarium, ammonia is converted into less harmful substances through the nitrogen cycle. Beneficial bacteria, specifically Nitrosomonas, oxidize ammonia into nitrite, which is still toxic but less so. Then another type of bacteria, Nitrobacter, converts nitrite into nitrate, which is much safer for fish in low concentrations. The goal of any aquarium filtration system, including a sponge filter, is to support this nitrogen cycle and keep ammonia levels at zero. So, does a sponge filter reduce ammonia? The short answer is yes, but let's break down exactly how it does that and what factors influence its effectiveness. The magic of a sponge filter lies in its ability to host beneficial bacteria. The sponge itself provides a massive surface area for those bacteria to colonize. When you set up a new sponge filter, it's not going to reduce ammonia right away because the bacteria need time to grow. This process is called cycling your aquarium, and it can take anywhere from a few weeks to months or more depending on your setup. During this time, ammonia levels might spike, which is why it's so important to cycle your tank before adding fish. Once the sponge filter is fully cycled, the beneficial bacteria living in the sponge will actively convert ammonia into nitrite and then nitrate, effectively reducing ammonia levels in your tank. The sponge filter does not directly eat ammonia. Instead, it creates the perfect environment for the bacteria that do the heavy lifting. On Blue Aquatics, we always stress the importance of patience during the cycling process because a rushed cycle can lead to ammonia spikes and stress out fish. Now, you might be wondering how effective is a sponge filter compared to other types of filters like hang on back filters or canister filters. This is a great question and it depends upon few factors. Sponge filters are fantastic for biological filtration, which is the process of hosting beneficial bacteria to break down ammonia and nitrite. Because of their large surface area, they can support a robust colony of bacteria, making them very effective at reducing ammonia in smaller tanks or tanks with a light bioload. A bioload is the amount of waste produced by the fish, shrimp, or other critters in your aquarium. For example, if you are running a 10-gallon tank with a few guppies or a beta, a sponge filter is often more than enough to keep ammonia in check. However, in larger tanks or tanks with a heavy bioload, like a chiclet tank or a tank with lot of fish, a single sponge filter might not provide enough filtration on its own. In those cases, you might need to pair it with another filter or use multiple sponge filters to handle the ammonia load. Let's talk about tank size and bioload in a bit more detail because this is where a lot of aquarists get tripped up. If you are watching Blue Aquatics, you know we love breaking down the nitty gritty to help you succeed. A sponge filter ability to reduce ammonia depends upon its size and the volume of water it can process. Small sponge filters are great for nano tanks like 5 or 10 gallons, but if you are running a 55-gallon tank, you will likely need a larger sponge filter or even 2 or 3 to keep up with the ammonia production. The bioload also matters. A tank with one beta produces way less ammonia than a tank with a school of tetras or a couple of goldfish. Goldfish, for example, are notorious for being messy eaters and producing a lot of waste, which means more ammonia. If your tank has a high bioload, you will need to make sure your sponge filter is appropriately sized and that you are maintaining it properly to keep those bacteria happy and working hard. Speaking of maintenance, let's dive in how to keep your sponge filter performing at its best. One of the biggest mistakes new aquarists make is over cleaning their sponge filter. Since the beneficial bacteria live in the sponge, you don't want to scrub it too aggressively or use tap water, which contains chlorine or chloramine that can kill those bacteria. Instead, when your sponge starts looking clogging or dirty, gently rinse it in a bucket of tank water during a water change. This removes debris without harming the bacteria. On Blue Aquatics, we always say treat your sponge filter like a living thing because in a way it is. The bacteria are your tank's unsung heroes and keeping them alive is key to reducing ammonia. You should also check your air pump regularly to make sure it's providing enough airflow. A weak pump means less water is being pulled through the sponge, which can reduce its ability to filter out ammonia effectively. Another factor to consider is whether your sponge filter is the only filtration system in your tank. In many setups, especially for beginners, a sponge filter is the primary or only filter. If that is the case, you need to make sure it's properly cycled and sized for your tank. However, some aquariums use sponge filters as a secondary filter alongside something like a canister filter or a hang-on bag filter. This can be great strategy because the sponge filter adds extra biological filtration, which is critical for ammonia reduction. For example, in a shrimp tank, you might use a sponge filter for gentle flow and biological filtration, while a small internal filter handles mechanical filtration to keep the water clear. The combination ensures that ammonia is being tackled by sponge filters bacteria while other waste is removed by the second filter. On Blue Aquatics, we love versatile steps like this because they give you flexibility and keep your tank stable. Now, let's address a common misconception. Some people think sponge filters are not powerful enough to handle ammonia in certain setups. This is not entirely true, but it depends upon the context. For example, in a heavy planted tank with a bioload which is low, a sponge filter can work wonders because the plants also help absorb some of the ammonia and nitrates. In fact, live plants can act as a natural ammonia reducer, complementing the work of your sponge filter. However, in a tank with no plants and a lot of fish, a sponge filter might need some help. This is where water changes come in. Regular water changes, say 20 to 30% weekly, are essential for keeping ammonia levels low, especially in the early stages of cycling or in tanks with a high bioload. Sponge filters are great, but they are not magic bullet. Combining them with good aquarium practices is the key to success. Let's explore some specific scenarios where sponge filters shine when it comes to ammonia reduction. If you are keeping shrimp like cherry shrimp or crystal shrimp, sponge filters are practically a must have. Shrimp are sensitive to water flow, and the gentle suction of a sponge filter is perfect for them. Plus, the sponge provides a surface for shrimp to graze on, and the bacteria keep ammonia levels low, which is critical for those delicate creatures. Similarly, in a fry tank where you are raising baby fish, a sponge filter is ideal because it won't suck up the tiny fry and it keeps the water clean by reducing ammonia. On Blue Aquatics, we have talked about how sponge filters are a game changer for breeding setups, and their ability to support a healthy nitrogen cycle is a big reason why. What about larger tanks or more complex setups? Can a sponge filter still reduce ammonia effectively? The answer is yes, but you might need to get creative. For example, in a 75-gallon tank with a moderate bioload, you could use 2 or 3 large sponge filters to ensure enough bacteria colonization to handle ammonia. Alternatively, you could pair a sponge filter with a canister filter for extra power. The sponge filter will focus on biological filtration, while the canister filter handles mechanical and chemical filtration. This kind of setup is great for community tanks with a mix of fish species. The key is to monitor your water parameters regularly using a test kit. On Blue Aquatics, we always recommend testing for ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate at least once a week to make sure your sponge filter is doing its job. So let's talk about some potential challenges you might face with sponge filters and ammonia. One issue is if your tank is overstocked. If you have too many fish for the size of your tank, the ammonia production might outpace the bacteria's ability to break it down, even with a sponge filter. In this case, you will need to reduce the number of fish, increase water changes, or add more filtration. Another challenge is if the sponge filter gets clogged with debris, which can reduce water flow and limit the bacteria's access to ammonia. Regular maintenance, as we discussed earlier, will prevent this. Finally, if your tank is not fully cycled yet, ammonia levels can spike. This is normal during the cycling process, but you will need to monitor closely and avoid adding fish until the cycle is complete. On Blue Aquatics, we have got plenty of videos on cycling your tank, so check those out if you need a step-by-step guide. For those of you who are visual learners, let's paint a picture of how a sponge filter fits into your aquarium ecosystem. Imagine your tank as a little underwater city. The fish are the residents, producing waste as they go about their day. The sponge filter is like the city's wastewater treatment plant, quietly working in the background. The bacteria living in the sponge are the workers, taking ammonia and turning it into its safer compounds. The air pump is the power source, keeping everything running smoothly. When all these parts work together, your tank stays clean and your fish stay happy. But if one part breaks down, like if the sponge gets too dirty or the air pump fails, the whole system can struggle and ammonia levels might creep up. That's why understanding how your sponge filter works is so important. Let's also touch on some advanced tips for maximizing your sponge filter ammonia. Reducing power. One trick is to seed a new sponge filter with bacteria from an established tank. You can do this by taking a piece of filter media from another tank and placing it near or inside the sponge filter. This jumpstarts the bacterial growth and helps the filter start reducing ammonia faster. Another tip is to use a pre-filtered sponge over the intake of your sponge filter if you are dealing with a lot of debris. This keeps the main sponge cleaner for longer, ensuring better water flow and bacterial efficiency. You can also experiment with different sponge filter sizes or shapes to find what works best for your tank. On Blue Aquatics, we love sharing these kind of hacks to help you get most of your aquarium setups. Now, let's address some alternative ways to reduce ammonia in your sponge filter needs a little extra help. Activated carbon or chemical filter media like zeolite can absorb ammonia, but these are temporary solution and don't replace the biological filtration provided by a sponge filter. Live plants, as we mentioned earlier, can also help by using ammonia as a nutrient. Water conditions that neutralize ammonia can be a lifesaver in an emergency, but they are not a long-term fix. The best approach is always to rely on your sponge filter biological filtration, combined with regular water changes and proper tank maintenance. On Blue Aquatics, we are all about sustainable, long-term solutions that keep your tank thriving. So as we wrap up, let's summarize the big picture. Yes, a sponge filter can absolutely reduce ammonia by providing a home for beneficial bacteria that convert ammonia into less harmful substances. It's an excellent choice for small tanks, shrimp tanks, fry tanks, or as a secondary filter in your larger setups. To make sure it works effectively, you need to cycle your tank properly. Choose the right size filter for your bioload and maintain it carefully. Sponge filters are simple, but they are powerful when used correctly. By combining them with good aquarium practices like regular water changes and monitoring your water parameters, you can keep ammonia at bay and create a healthy environment for your fish. So, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into sponge filters and ammonia reduction here on Blue Aquatics. I hope you found this video helpful. Whether you are a beginner, just starting out, or an experienced aquarist looking to fine tune your setup, if you have any questions about sponge filter, ammonia, or anything else aquarium related, drop them in the comments below. I love hearing from you. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your fish keeping friends, and subscribe to Blue Aquatics for more tips and tricks to make your aquarium thrive. Until next time, keep those tanks clean and your fish happy. See you in the next video. Bye bye.